So hello, today I'm at St James's Church in Great Sailing in Essex, and I'd like to talk to you about the history of the church and the village itself. So Great Sailing is a village in Essex. It's 5 miles from Braintree and 1.5 miles from Bardfield Sailing. The village is surrounded by Essex country farmland. The elevation here is 86 metres or 282 feet in old money. And today's population is around 337. Now, nearby Braintree town had a large Roman settlement for over 4 centuries, so it's highly likely that people lived here during that period. Now, the name Sailing is an interesting one. In Old Saxon, ling meant heather. Now, in 1066, the Saxon manor here was divided between Algar and the Freeman, and the overlord was Whitgar. Now, Whitgar's father was connected with the last Danish Saxon courts in England and held lands across Essex, or North Essex and Suffolk. Now, during the Norman occupation of 1086, Great Sailing comprised of 2 villagers, 5 smallholders and 3 slaves. This was a sign of great wealth. Now, also of significance, there was a priest here in 1086. And you can just make out the tower of St James's Church to the right. Now, the first Norman lord here was Turstin of Wishart. There were no other Turstins in Essex at that time. Now, above Turstin was John, son of Welheron, who acted as the tenant-in-chief, most important role here. Now, the name Welleran means wall raven, from the dark ages of King Arthur. It's fascinating researching these ancient families. Now, Turstin's son, Sir Baldwin Wishart, would build St James's Church and attach to the manor of today's Sailing Hall. Now, in the year of 1131, Sir Baldwin would give the church to the Augustinian Priory at nearby Little Dunmow, and there would be patrons here until 1536. That's 405 years later. Now, also in 1131 of the year, another Baldwin, Baldwin II, would become Jerusalem's first Crusader king. Taking his monastic vows, he is buried in Jerusalem's Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Also in 1131, the Knights Templar Crusaders would support King Alfonso of Spain. And the eldest son of King Louis of France would die when his horse trips over a black pig which runs out of a dung heap in Paris, a market there. Now, I did find an interesting American connection to this quiet Essex village. In 1631, Valentine Parentis, and what a great name that was, would emigrate to Massachusetts, America. The shipping company was set up in nearby Braintree, and the ship was called the Lion, and it would make 4 trips. Now, Valentine's ancestors, William, likely lived here, as his last will and testament was read out in the very walls of St James in 1574. We can definitely see that spring is on its way. Now jumping forward to 1796, Bartlett Goodrich, an American from Virginia, would purchase Great Sailings Hall, and Bartlett would live here for the next 29 years. Now, the Goodriches were an early American family, having lived there for 150 years. Now, if I'm correct, Bartlett's father, John Goodrich, was a loyalist during the War of America's Independence, and John would become a notorious privateer, sinking many a ship. Captured in North Carolina and jailed in Virginia, John would later escape, returning to privateering in New York. Now, after the war, John and some of his family left for England, and Bartlett would settle right here in Great Sailing, whilst John Sr. would end his days in Devon. Now, if we look dead centre in the frame, we've got the White Hart, who it used to be. It's early 17th century and timber framed. Now, this pub was home to the Esser Huffer, a triangular bread roll filled with a manner of foods. Now, in 1839, Samuel Adcock was the landlord here, and by 1851 he would have run the post office and described as running a brewery and being an innkeeper. Now, the White Hart was named after a mature stag, was the personal badge of Richard II of 1377. It's one of the oldest White Hart inns still survives in nearby Braintree. So the old inn closed and became tea rooms and a gallery, and this would have been the main pub for the American servicemen during World War II. Today it's in private residence.
Sex. Yes.
So now we're going to look at the World War II pillbox, which was built to defend a road junction. So you can see the road here. If we pan around, it's just hidden in the corner there. In case of German invasion, and you can imagine that. Now sited directly opposite the White Hart Inn. So I can imagine the soldiers on sentry duty looking through the spy hole in front of us, directly opposite the pub. It's a rare sunken Type 26 pillbox. Entrance is on the other side of the wall. I absolutely love it, and I love the fact it's still here. So until the 1970s, the Great Sailing had the biggest, tallest and the oldest elm tree in the whole of England at that time. And it measured 22 feet 6 inches around its girth and was over 130 feet high. It was about 40 metres in new money. So in World War II, the old tree was pollarded for the low-flying aircraft, the bomber group that were here. And then it was struck down by the deadly Dutch elm disease in the 1970s. And as I understand it, there was once an avenue of elm trees along this very road. Go in this direction. So now we shall move forward once again, for Great Sailing would play its part in the theatre of war. In 1942, the 819th US Aviation Engineering Battalion would arrive here, and their mission was to build an airbase. Now remember, in 1942 the population numbered just 250, and the 800 engineers must have made good business for the pub we just looked at. Now the engineers would build what is today known as Andrewsfield. Now on the 20th of May 1943, Andrewsfield would become operational. Now shortly after, the 96th and 322nd Bombardment Groups would fly their missions from here in the B-26 medium bombers. They were nicknamed the Marauders. Now their missions would take them all over France, Belgium, Germany, the Netherlands. Their missions would be to knock out airfields, shipyards, gun batteries, railways and bridges. And one of their bombers was actually nicknamed Flakbait and would be the only US bomber to fly over 200 missions. So now we've made our way to St James Church. We're going to talk about the man himself. So who was James? Well, he was also known as the son of Zebedee and James the Great. Well, James was born in Galilee and would become a disciple to Jesus of Nazareth. James's brother was John the Apostle, and the two brothers were with their father Zebedee by the seashore when Jesus called them to follow him. Now the brothers earned the nickname Sons of Thunder because of their fiery temper. Now James, John and Peter would follow Jesus to the Garden of Gethsemane, where they were asked to stay awake and pray. Jesus prayed twice, checking on the disciples after each prayer and finding them asleep. And Jesus said, "The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Now King Herod Agrippa had James executed by the sword. Herod was the grandson of Herod the Great. Today it's believed that James's head is buried under the altar of St James Cathedral in the Armenian quarter of Jerusalem. Now if you do go there, the spot is marked by a piece of red marble surrounded by 6 lamps. Now St James is the patron saint of Spain, veterinarians, pharmacists and woodcarvers. And right next to the church is Great Sailings Hall. Now they did say it was forecast for a touch of snow, and I've just seen some flakes. It's currently about 3 degrees. And the weather did promise some sun, so I've been unlucky. But anyway, if we look at St James's Church, the walls are built of flint rubble with blocks of freestones. Dressings are of Shelley oolite and clunch. Now I just want to show you what I believe is some Shelley oolite. So Shelley oolite is made up of tiny shells and skeletons mixed with grains of sand, and it would have been from a shallow, warm sea floor, similar to what we would have in the Bahamas, those sort of places. But it is now 350 million years old. 350 million years old. Now we should start with the south porch, and it was built in the 19th century. It's most likely replacing a much earlier one. Now the roof may well be from the original one, which is dated to around the 15th century. Above the south door we can see a nice lamp, and there's a board with some writing on it behind. If I'm not mistaken, it goes into detail about how many sittings or seats are in this church. Now the south doorway, the jambs and the stonework and displays are said to be 15th century. Now let us go into this lovely old church. I shall take my cap off. We shall enter. Unusually the door handle's on the opposite side. Looks like it's a pine door, quite recent. If we pan around, we can look at the aspect of the south doorway. Now you may be able to hear some clicking, knocking noises, and that's the church clock behind me. Now we're standing in the nave, which measures 46 feet by 23 feet. Now the south-east angle is 12th century. That'll be just there. The windows and doorways are all 14th century. Now so much has been altered and covered over in the 19th century, and it's most likely that a wooden church was here before the time of 1086. Just imagine that. Now if we look to the right of the door, there's a small board, and this lists the incumbents of great sailing. All the years are put down. Now I shall use the lights as and when, but it's quite a nice atmosphere if you leave them off at times. We're going to start with this window on the north wall. And this window is for the Ukraine prayer, the war is currently going on there. And we've just passed the 1 year mark where Ukraine and Russia have gone to war with each other. And it's a very tragic war, as all wars are. These people are most connected to their past. Now we're going to look at this wonderful old font. It's an early 15th century octagonal font dated to 1410, which is most unusual because fonts are normally within a century. Now in this year of 1410, the Welsh leader Owen Glendower continues his fight against the English for Welsh independence, and Owen would fight for another 5 years. He has become a legend in Wales. If we look at the font itself, notice the uncharged shield. Normally a noble family crest would have been carved into this. Now I've removed the font cover and notice the damage here and over here. Now this is damage to the lid fasteners. Now, during the Middle Ages, holy water was considered to be sacred and powerful. Now, the Archbishop Edmund Rich of 1236 said, fonts are to be kept under lock and key because of witchcraft. And priests would hold the key. Now, the lid fasteners have been damaged and we don't know why or when. But I did read that holy water was added in Easter to symbolise new life and was renewed the following Easter. Can you imagine that? Now let us have a look against the south wall. You might not notice this at first, but just between these two benches or pews is the stoop. Well, I believe it's a stoop. Now, as you enter the church, you would dip your fingers into this stoop at the door and make the sign of the cross. So if we move around, going back onto the north wall, we've got the original doorway for the north side. Now, this north doorway, now blocked, was late 14th century. It's most likely it would have been used by the lords and ladies of Great Sailings Hall and Manor. And when we're outside we can see how it correlates to the gate on the opposite wall. Now we look at the World War I memorial and it lists the men that made the ultimate sacrifice. And you can see this presented by Margaretta Harrison. Beneath, just as importantly, the men that never returned from World War II. And my favourite monarch, the late Queen Elizabeth II. Okay, if we make our way down towards the chancel, we've got a lovely stained glass window here. This window is dedicated to Thomas William Elrington, 1892, who was vicar here for 36 years. Now, I'm not sure of the left panel, but I think the right panel is Jesus raising Jairus' daughter. It's one of the miracles. And as usual, I've got the wrong window. This is dedicated to Reverend Erlington. Just look at the wonderful detail. Now, if you look next to the Erlington window, we've got a memorial, which is something else. And this is a vault memorial on the south wall. Now, beneath the carved effigy, it lists Elizabeth Yeldham of 1786 and John Yeldham of 1788. And I'm just wondering if John died of grief only 2 years after losing his wife Elizabeth. And how they used a different language back in the 18th century. So if we walk slightly closer to the chancel, we've got another nice window here. Now this window, if I'm not mistaken, is dedicated to the infant son Jasper Harrison, 1883, and it was donated by his great aunt Elizabeth Fisher. Now the top tracery I found in this church most unusual because they're so large, the apertures. Now in this window the disciples tried to turn the children away, but Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Now just to the side we have the pulpit. Notice the steps and the single stem that holds it up, supports it. Can't resist climbing the steps. Now we're looking at the chancel. Now the chancel measures 22 feet by 16 feet. I'm afraid I've got no date on it. But if we look at the roof itself, now this restored roof is 15th century. The braced collar beams rest on moulded wall plates, much similar to those of the porch. And again, great craftsmanship. From inside the chancel, if we look at the actual arch itself, now this is described as being modern, 19th century, but it is a fine Victorian copy, but it gives you an idea of what the original would have looked like when new. If you look at the capitals, we have some really nice carvings. Perhaps this is a bishop wearing his mitre. So if we enter the chancel, we can see the organ here. I have no details of the organ itself, but I can tell you that organist Leonard Adams played here for 42 years. Now he started in 1936 and he finished in 1978. So for a bit of fun, I looked up these years. In 1936, the most popular artist was Bing Crosby with Pennies from Heaven. And in 1978, the Bee Gees with Staying Alive. Now let's move over and look at this vestry door. Again made in the Victorian period, and the vestry was on the other side. Again, we've got a really nice carving to the left. And to the right side we've got a corbel. I'm not sure what would have been on there originally. So we've got a nice window here on the south wall. Now this window is Jesus and his disciples were crossing the Sea of Galilee in a boat when a furious storm and struck. Jesus rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased and there was a dead calm. This was his 13th miracle. Now we can see the high altar here in front of us. We can look at the window behind. So beneath the window we've got a sedilia and some fine tiles. Looks like it's a soft sandstone parish in there. Okay, now we shall make our way to the West Tower. Now, as you walk through this building, you'll see that it seems to be offset, so I'm not sure when this happened, probably guessing the Victorian period. Because again, if we look over here, it seems to have widened everything. Perhaps it was when they built or constructed the vestry. If I turn around, it's a side door to the vestry as well. So now we're standing inside the West Tower, which is late 14th century and measures 8 by 8 feet. It's built in 3 stages with a parapet, and we'll see that outside. Here we have the west window.